All right, children, you can go on down and eat an extra snack for me, would you?
I'll eat it for you,
Okay, thank you. I'm on a diet. Let's pray. Lord, as we come to your word and spend time pondering your truth, who you are, who we are, and what you are remaking among us, I pray that you would speak to us in ways that there's no possible way I can. Teach us and transform us. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So as Doris mentioned, today's a special day on the church calendar. It is called Christ the King Sunday. And I thought, in light of that, I would give you a little bit of an overview of why that is a day on the church calendar, or why there are even church calendar days. If you're like me, maybe you aren't familiar with the church calendar. I grew up in a church that didn't, aside from, maybe we did some Advent things like Advent readings, and then there's Easter. Maybe there was a little bit of talk about Lent. Other than that, I didn't really know that there was such a thing as a church calendar. If you grew up in more of one of the mainline traditions, then maybe you were more familiar with it. But basically, the church calendar begins on the first Sunday of Advent. So that's like the church's New Year's Day. And the Advent season runs until Christmas Day. And then the Christmas season starts. So if you think about the Christmas season, we, in our consumeristic society, the build-up to Christmas Day is typically seen as the Christmas season, right? We put up our tree, we start Christmas shopping, we do all kinds of Christmassy things leading up to Christmas Day, and then after Christmas Day, we sort of move into a new season or a different time, getting ready for the new year or whatever. But in the church calendar, leading up to Christmas Day is actually preparation for Christmas. It's a season of anticipation, awaiting the coming Messiah. And then on Christmas Day, and then for 12 days, is Christmas. That is the Christmas season, the 12 days of Christmas. We all know that song. The song comes from the church calendar. The 12 days of Christmas ends on January 5th, and then the next day is Epiphany. And Epiphany commemorates the visit of the Magi, who represent the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people. So God revealing himself to non-Jewish people is commemorated on January 6th. And that season of Epiphany continues on until the beginning of the Lent season, which starts on Ash Wednesday. And that is a moving date. So there's no set number of days between Epiphany and Ash Wednesday, because the beginning of Lent depends on when Easter is. And I won't get into all that, but there's a reason why it moves around. And Lent continues. It's 40 days long plus Sundays, so 46 days. And then is Easter, and then the Easter season continues until Pentecost, and the Easter season is 7 weeks long. And then after Pentecost is what is called ordinary time. And so today is the last Sunday of ordinary time, the Sunday before the first Sunday of Advent. And in 1925, the Catholic Church decided they wanted to make the last Sunday before Advent a special day. And so they called it Christ the King Sunday. And there's a little bit of political reason why they did that. But I actually think it's a very good thing to remember and commemorate. The Anglican, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian churches kind of followed in the Catholics' initiation of this day. And for nearly 100 years, this has been remembered as a special day. It's a day meant to remind people that we are ruled above all by Jesus Christ. He is our King. and all earthly rulers are subject to him. And it's a really helpful way to end the church year as we step over the threshold into the Advent season and the Christmas season. It's a time of anticipation for the next year's Christ the King Sunday. I kind of think of that as a cyclical experience, that we step from Christ the King into anticipating Jesus the baby, Messiah, King. And you'll see on the artwork that I made for the Advent series, there will be a picture of a manger and a crown above the manger. And because he was king from day one, from the day he was born, and even before that, he is the eternal king of all creation. And so it's kind of a neat way to end the church year. One of the traditional readings for Christ the King Sunday is from Luke 23, verse 35 to 43. It says, "The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, 'He saved others, let him save himself, if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one.' The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, 'If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself.' There was a written notice above him which read, 'This is the King of the Jews.' One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. 'Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us.' But the other criminal rebuked him. 'Don't you fear God?' He said, 'Since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong.' Then he said, 'Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.' And Jesus answered him, 'Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise.'" And the reason I think this, I don't know the actual reason, but a reason I would give for this being an appropriate passage for this Sunday is that Jesus was king just as much on the cross as he is now on the throne. The king was killed. He didn't become king after. He was king before. And he was killed. And that was the demonstration of his divine authority and power, was to be crucified for his people. That's the sort of king we have. He is the king in a manger, and he is the king on the cross, and he is the king on the throne. And it's fitting that we have come to the end of our study in Hebrews on Christ the King Sunday, because we have seen all throughout Hebrews that Jesus is the fulfillment of all of God's promises. And we have seen how, because of Jesus, we can now draw near to God. One of the promises fulfilled in Jesus is that of an eternal king. It was promised to King David in 2 Samuel 7. "The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." And this was partially fulfilled by David's son Solomon, who built the first temple in Jerusalem. But it is ultimately and finally fulfilled through Jesus, who we see in Hebrews is the eternal royal priest. And so now we come to the final chapter in Hebrews, which is unlike any other chapter in the letter. And we're going to switch gears really quickly because of that. The letter switches gears really quickly, and we're going to switch gears really quickly. This section of the letter contains some general instructions about life together as a church community and concludes with a blessing and final greetings. So I'm going to read the chapter, and then we will examine the instructions. Hebrews 13. "Keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering. Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed be kept pure. For God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. Keep your lives free from the love of money, and be content with what you have, because God has said, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." So we say with confidence, "The Lord is my helper, and I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me?" Remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Do not be carried away by all kinds of strange teachings. It is good for our hearts to be strengthened by grace, not by eating ceremonial foods, which is of no benefit to those who do so. We have an altar from which those who minister at the tabernacle have no right to eat. The high priest carries the blood of animals into the most holy place as a sin offering, but the bodies are burned outside the camp. And so Jesus also suffered outside the city gate to make the people holy through his own blood. Let us then go to him outside the camp, bearing the disgrace he bore. For here we do not have an enduring city, but we are looking for the city that is to come. Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips that openly profess his name. And do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased. Have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Do this so that their work will be a joy, not a burden, for that would be of no benefit to you. Pray for us. We are sure that we have a clear conscience and desire to live honorably in every way. I particularly urge you to pray so that I may be restored to you soon. Now may the God of peace, who through the blood of the eternal covenant brought back from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep, equip you with everything good for doing his will. And may he work in us what is pleasing to him through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. Brothers and sisters, I urge you to bear with my word of exhortation, for in fact I have written to you quite briefly. Okay, briefly. I want you to know that our brother Timothy has been released. If he arrives soon, I will come with him to see you. Greet all your leaders and all the Lord's people. Those from Italy send you their greetings. Grace be with you all. So this letter closes very similarly to the way Paul closes his letters. And so it contains a few words of instruction, a benediction, and some greetings. This is typical of Paul's letters. And this is partly why some people believe Paul wrote Hebrews. It ends with a note about Timothy. Timothy was Paul's disciple, and with a greeting from people in Italy, and we know that Paul wrote letters from Italy. But I am convinced that it was not written by Paul, but by one of his disciples. And it fits within everything we know about that time and what was going on, that it makes sense that one of Paul's disciples wrote Hebrews. In fact, maybe it was based on a sermon that one of his disciples preached and then turned into a document that was circulated. And then this ending was sort of not added on, but it was included as sort of to make it fit within a letter format. So if you think, well, this looks like Paul wrote it, that would be why. The first 6 verses contain general ethical instructions. This is where we're going to spend most of our time. And I told Michael that if we end at 11, I'm probably going to take the whole rest of the time right till noon, because this is a doozy of a passage. And I have enough material here that we could have lunch and come back and keep going, but we won't do that. The first 6 verses are very dense instruction, very dense instruction. And it begins with a simple but extremely important and foundational command. The original statement in verse 1, which is translated in the NIV as "keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters," that statement in the original language is just "keep loving." 2 words, keep loving. And the word for love in this statement is the word Philadelphia. And some of us know what that means. It means brotherly love. Brotherly love. So the interpretation of the statement in most translations is to keep loving each other like brothers. And this idea of loving one another like a brother is deeply rooted in both the Jewish and the Roman cultures. This is a high value in their society. Brotherly love. Even among pagans, brotherly love was a thing well known in the culture and highly valued. In the early church, this emphasis on brotherly love was elevated. It was elevated mostly by Jesus, but because of the way the church developed and grew as sort of an underground sect of Judaism. And so the people learned how to love one another like family. And Jesus taught his disciples to love one another as brothers and sisters, and even referred to them as his brothers and sisters. In 1 John 3, verse 16 to 18, it says, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters." So you can see how that command to love one another, this little statement in 13 verse 1, keep loving, it's not just a feel-good emotion you have toward one another, like we feel affectionate toward one another. It is laying down our lives for one another. It's going above and beyond to live in a sacrificial way so that the people that we call brothers and sisters in the church will benefit from being in a relationship with us. That's the idea. If anyone has, this is continuing in 1 John, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. So, we cannot call ourselves followers of Jesus if we do not love one another. This is the beginning of our faith. This is foundational. If we can't get this right, then we're not going to get anything else right. It's really important. And more than this, the passage goes on, our call to love is extended to strangers. Jesus taught his followers to care for strangers as well. In Matthew 25, he says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat, and I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Christians in those early days of the church, they would have been traveling from one place to another. What they would have been called apostles, not like the apostles proper that Jesus assigned, but there were multiple different apostles, people who were sent out. That's what that word means, to be sent out. So they would be traveling from one place to another for different reasons, and they would especially appreciate hospitality from fellow Christians, because the inns and the places of hospitality sort of set up by the Romans, or sort of the like what would be referred to as like the secular world, they would not be conducive for Christian lifestyle. Let's just say that. I mean, to say it plainly, most of them were brothels. Like, they were not moral places. And so they probably didn't want to go there. And if not that, then they would have been dangerous places. So in an early church document that contained supplemental teachings to the Bible, instructions were given for how to house strangers. So this is what you would do. This is the instructions that churches would get. Let every apostle who comes to you be received as the Lord. So as though Jesus was coming to you, receive him as if Jesus was coming to your door. But he must not stay more than 1 day, or 2 if it's absolutely necessary. If he stays 3 days, he's a false prophet. Very specific. And when the apostle leaves you, let him take nothing but a loaf until he reaches further lodging for the night. If he asks for money, he is a false prophet. So very specific. So be hospitable, but be wise. Right? This is sort of that that because people would take advantage of the extreme generosity of Christians. They started to figure this out. Like Christians, they're a little slow. Maybe I can trick them, and they'll give me all their money. Well, that maybe happened sometimes. So they had to give this instruction: like, don't be stupid with this. Be wise. The instruction in Hebrews continues with caring for people who are in prison and those who have been mistreated due to their faith in Jesus. And this was becoming increasingly common because in those days, the persecution of Christians was ramping up. This cold air is getting to my throat. Some people today might take this passage as a call to prison ministry. And I've actually heard it quoted and used in that way, that they're called to do prison ministry based on this passage. But this is not telling us to go visit people in prison generically and have prison ministry set up. That is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. Prison ministry is wonderful. It's not something I have felt particularly drawn and called to, but I know people who have, and I just highly value that ministry. It is specifically a call to care for the persecuted, for the mistreated. It has more to do with what organizations like Voice of the Martyrs or Nick Ripken Ministries are doing, caring for persecuted Christians. And here in central Alberta, we don't have that. Some people might feel like they're persecuted, but we aren't. Objectively, we are not persecuted just because of our association with Jesus. We may get teased and poked and prodded, and we may feel like we're outsiders at times, but none of us have been in prison, and we don't know anybody in Alberta who have been imprisoned only because of their association with Jesus. It doesn't happen here. It's illegal to do that. But in Rome, it was everywhere. And many parts of the world, if you say you're a Christian, just by saying that, you could be imprisoned. And so that's what this is talking about. Care for those people. Because no one else is going to. Who else is going to care for them except for other Christians? The principle behind the instruction is about empathy and compassion for those who suffer without any ability to help themselves. It's attached to the call for Christians to help the helpless. So the question is, what is going on around us? Who are the people who can't help themselves, who are alone, utterly alone, who, without the help of us, will get no help at all? It requires paying attention to what's going on in our community and stepping forward when we see someone in need. The instruction then moves on to the household, referring to sex and money. Oh, you got me some more water? I got some already, but this will keep me going. The rest, now I can take a bigger sip. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. All right. This is hard to speak about. Sex and money. Nothing divides more than these things. I'm not afraid to talk about these things, but I want to make sure I say the right things because I don't want you to hear me wrong. Okay? This is never about pointing fingers, telling you need to change this or that in your life. I'm sure all of us need to change something in our lives. I need to change things in my life. That's not where this is coming from. Okay? These things, it's written down here. I want to preach from the Bible. This is in the Bible. So here we go. These two pieces of instruction about sex and money are directly related to the theme of holiness that we've seen throughout the book of Hebrews. I'll deal first with money. The love of money, I understand why it's translated this way, but the word that's often used for money in the New Testament is not actually about currency. It's not about the actual cash. or the ability to purchase stuff. It's not about, the love of money is not about wanting to earn or save money. That's not what this is about. Earning and saving money is a good thing, is a wise thing. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy, making lots of money, having a healthy savings account. Inherently, those are just fine things. The issue here is around the idea of mammon. I wish this was a word that we had in the English language. We don't really have a word for this. So mammon is used very frequently, and Jesus says in Matthew 6, verse 24, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon." So what does mammon mean? Essentially, it would be best translated as greed. It involves dishonest gain or gain at the expense of somebody else. It's thinking that in order for me to be wealthy, someone else needs to become poor. It's the opposite of the character of God. As Jesus demonstrated through his life, God is generous, abundantly generous. And the increase of God's glory and fame does not require the decrease of us. In fact, as he is increased in glory and fame, blessings and joy and enjoyment of life increases for his people. As followers of Jesus, everyone around us should benefit from our presence. As we increase in wealth, others should increase in wealth. And I know there are many among us here who believe and live that. And that is absolutely wonderful. That is a very clear demonstration of what being blessed truly means. And as we'll see on Tuesday at our AGM, we're facing another financial surplus. We have a bunch of money extra that we need to make a decision on. And this is such a good thing. Not many churches have to figure out what to do with their extra money. So, come and participate in that conversation. It's a good thing to participate in. And the question we should be asking is, how is our abundance blessing our community? It's not about us. I mean, yeah, we want to make some changes and make some improvements and maintain this property that we have in a way that'll sustain it. But we also want to ask, well, how do we benefit our community? Because we have excess. The question is, how can we be a blessing? Because of the blessings that we have received, how can we bless others? So if we're to be a people set apart as representatives of God, we need to demonstrate his generosity and share his blessings with others. And we must work hard to live free from the misuse of money. I'm going to begin this next little bit, and I'm going to use some commentators here a little bit because they have done a lot of work on this topic that I don't have time for, and I maybe don't have the intelligence for, but I'm depending heavily on some commentators, and if you ever want to see the notes, I always post the notes and with footnotes and references. But just know that I'm in good company with what I'm about to share with you about the topic of sex, okay? William Lane is one commentator. He says, "Regard for marriage is an essential expression of the quality of love that binds the community together as brothers and sisters who share a common confession. As a community, we must respect marriage as a gift from God and support those who share the marriage relationship with empathy and affection." There are two terms in this passage in 13, verse 4 and 5. Well, verse 4 mainly. Two terms used. They're translated in the NIV, adultery and sexual immorality. These are two different ideas, two different words. Adultery is really simple to define. It is simply the breach of the one flesh relationship of marriage. So it describes any act of sexual intercourse between a married woman and a man other than her husband, and all sexual intercourse involving a married man and another man's wife or fiance. That's the definition they would have understood, those who received this letter. So that's adultery. Really simple to understand. The other word, sexual immorality, is broader than this. The Greek word is porneia, which is where we get the word pornography from. Again, referring to a commentator, sexual immorality is actually a rejection of the presence and goodness of God, who created the human family in its maleness and femaleness. It is an expression of a selfishness blind to the emotional fragility that characterizes every person. That's a loaded statement. It is an expression of a selfishness blind to the emotional fragility that characterizes every person. We all are fragile. We all have desires. We all want to be fulfilled. And when we allow our emotions to overtake those desires and to direct those desires toward unhealthy things, that's what this is talking about. Blind to the fact that these are misdirected desires. That's what they are. The writer warns that those who place a personal gratification above responsibility to God and to the community will encounter God himself as judge. This is antithetical in its purest sense to our culture. Our culture, and I hear it all the time from good people with good intentions, talk about autonomy. This is an idea that comes from the philosopher Kant. Immanuel Kant elevated autonomy above everything else. That autonomy is basically what guides everything we do. I am the most important thing in the world. And you being able to choose whatever you want, that's the most important thing in the world. That is not biblical. Personal autonomy is not the most important thing in the world. And so when we seek personal gratification above our responsibility to God and to his people, we are faced with God's judgment. Now, I don't want to go into what that means specifically, but it doesn't sound good. We don't want that. And some of you might, at this point, want a list of things included in what constitutes this word, or what's included in this word, porneia, sexual immorality. And I'm not going to give you a list. Lists are not helpful in this situation. Lists like that produce religious legalism and encourage us to set up boundary markers for ourselves and others that produce pride and guilt. They produce pride when I'm within my own sort of idea of what the limitations are, and look at me and I'm living perfectly, and it produces guilt when you're not living within those things. And those are not healthy ways to think about this. Instead, let me make it really simple. The idea behind this word is that the marriage bed will be kept pure when your sexual gratifications and actions are only experienced within your marriage, within your relationship with your spouse. The marriage bed will be kept pure when your sexual gratifications and actions are only experienced within your marriage. It's just a really simple way to think about it. So then you can do the work in your own life and your mind and think, how am I not living within that? And how can I keep my marriage pure? Now, not all of you are married. And so then the question is for you, what does this mean? Well, if you're unmarried, or if your marriage does not include any sort of sexual relationship, which is, it's not uncommon, then you can replace spouse with God. So all of your sexual desires, gratification, is directed toward God, He will fulfill it. You don't need to go outside of purity and have some sort of excuse. He will fulfill it. In 1 Corinthians 7, Paul has some really good stuff in Corinthians, and this is something we'll cover, and I was looking at my schedule. If you don't know, I have like a 5-year sermon plan, and in 2 years I'll be covering Corinthians, so you can look forward to that, 2 years. And we'll cover some of this stuff, but he talks about keeping sexual activity within marriage, and if you want to review a little bit more in the Bible and what I'm saying, that would be a good place to look around that area in 1 Corinthians 7. Is everyone okay? Okay, let's continue on. I know this is a heavy thing, but as I was telling the team before the service, so many pastors are accused of not talking about this from the pulpit, and I don't want to be one of those pastors. This is so important. It's actually at the center of our life together as Christians. It really is, and it needs to be brought back to the center. And it's really all about purity and elevating the value of purity. So this section ends with a reminder that God is the one who gives us what we ultimately need. He's the one. We go very wrong when we turn from God and toward people or things or money or power or anything else for contentment. None of those other things can bear the weight of our worship. Our marriage cannot bear the weight of all of the needs that I have as a person. My job, my career, my children, my parents. There's no amount of money that can bear the weight of what we really desire as humans. Only God can, because He is meant to be the object of our worship. We are not people who need to live in fear or anxiety about how we will be satisfied in life. Satisfaction is right in front of us. We have a God who promises to be with us and give us everything we need. So I've spent a lot of time on this short section because it contains such a concise list of important things. So let's just spend a little bit of time on the next section. Verse 7 to 19. And this section contains a reference to some strange teachings about food and sacrifice. So again, like this huge switch, and I don't know what's going on. I tried to do a little research, like what's going on in this letter right at the end, and no one has a good answer. So someone just had the author just had a bunch of quick things that he needed to say and put them all in at the end. And so now we switch gears really quickly to food and sacrifice. Maybe not that far off from the other things, and because it's all about our desires. But the underlying message is that Jesus does not require us to maintain any sort of ritual in order to draw near to God. Okay, so all these, and we don't have this so much in our culture, but for them it was all these Jewish practices. I've talked about this before in Hebrews, that they were tempted to go back to these things because they felt like, oh well, this doesn't feel like any sort of worship. In fact, Christians were called atheists by a lot of the people around them because they didn't have any temple, they didn't have a place of worship, they didn't have any visible signs that they worshipped any god. They had these things that they referred to as love feasts, which was communion, and that's about all they had. And so they were considered to be atheists because they didn't have these rituals. Our God doesn't require us to do these special things in order for Him to be happy with us. Jesus has done everything that's required. He has met all of the requirements. So if anyone says that in order to be accepted by God, you have to eat this or not eat that, or practice this ritual or say that prayer, they are being deceived. Maybe they do those things because it is part of them drawing near to God. And that's totally fine. We practice communion. We're doing the prayer night, which is a practice that is part of our drawing near to God, but almost everything in our lives can be part of that practice. God wants us to bring everything to him. And so we can draw near to him with all of us, with all that we are. So what is required of us? And this was the question. This is the debate. All through, even as Jesus was teaching, they would ask him, well, what do we do? And the early church leaders, well, what do we do? It sounds too easy. What is required of us? All that is required is to trust Jesus at his word. And that means getting to know who he is. That's part of it. But we're already accepted. We're already in the inner circle. We're already invited into the presence of God. And then we can learn what that looks like, how that shapes our lives. A primary concern of Jesus and the early church leaders was that people kept trying to save themselves through their behavior. They kept trying to do things to earn God's favor. Free yourselves of that burden. If you feel like you haven't measured up, that you haven't done enough, that you're not in the right place, maybe there's some animosity with someone else in church, or there's some guilt you have hanging over your head because of a sin and addiction, free yourself of the burden that stuff needs to be gone before God will receive you. Okay? That is not the issue. Those things, as you draw near to God, they will be stripped away. It'll be painful. They will be stripped away because as you enter the presence of God, he purifies you. But you cannot get yourself pure enough to enter the presence of God. Jesus has done that and will continue to do that. This section also, again, shifting gears, this section also includes instructions to submit to the church leaders. This is where I really get to lay down the hammer. No. Oh man, I'm the last person to demand something like this. Submit to the church leaders. Have confidence in them. Ensure that the leaders don't have an extra burden to carry because you're constantly trying to undermine their authority. This I tell you, as a leader, this is the worst experience. I can handle criticism. That's totally fine. You can bring me criticism, tell me what I'm teaching is wrong. That's totally fine. We can have conversations about that. But when you are hunting down and digging and going around and trying to figure out how to undermine me as a pastor and digging up things and making false claims and stuff, that's gonna take all my energy away. So you may not find enough dirt to, well, you probably will find enough dirt to say, I'm not worthy of being a pastor. No one's worthy of this job. But what's going to break me is that process of trying to undermine me. If you have a problem with me, then let's talk about it. You're going to have a problem with me, I guarantee it. And I will humbly accept your criticism. And I'll speak on behalf of the board and ministry leaders, people who are responsible for making decisions that affect all of us. Please don't add this burden to them of undermining them. If they are doing something you disagree with, humbly seek understanding. Why? Why are they doing that? And humbly offer alternative advice. There's nothing wrong with doing that. We can do that, and we can still love each other. So if I, as your pastor, am behaving in a way that is contrary to Scripture or is culturally inappropriate, which I think is important as well, then I need to be held accountable. I need to live in a way that is open to correction. This is not an excuse for leaders just to do whatever they want and to be mean and rude and arrogant and proud, and you just all have to submit. That's not what this is about. It's about caring enough about your leaders to hold them accountable, but in a way that wants to see them succeed. Because leaders in the church should be setting the example for how to live. The author of Hebrews says, consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. This is one of the main reasons I never wanted to be in a leadership position. Because this is the calling. I'm supposed to live in a way where you, like some of you have lived as Christians longer than I've been alive. Like you've been mature Christians since before I was born, and I'm supposed to set an example for you? Oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do that, but that's the calling. That's the responsibility. And it's not just for me, it's for anyone in position of leadership, anyone making decisions, setting direction. And because this is such a difficult position to be in, any amount of support and encouragement is appreciated. But not fake stuff. My sermon sucked, you got to tell me. I'm still waiting. Waiting for the criticism. Everyone keeps saying, oh, I love your preaching. Well, are you being honest? Because I've heard it enough. I'm good. I've heard enough of the good stuff. Tell me what I need to change. And I'm going to go probably over 50 minutes today, so maybe today's the day. I don't try to be controversial, but sometimes I want to be. All right. Oh, well, thank you, Michael. All right, so I want to close this message and the series by summarizing the letter's message and explaining this benediction. I've been saying this benediction through the whole series. This will be your 13th, well, more than 13th time hearing it. And it's this blessing, this benediction, which I try to memorize. I'm terrible at memorizing Scripture. If you ever feel bad about not being able to memorize Scripture, just know your pastor sucks at it. Like, I try so hard. I try to memorize these things. I don't have an excuse. It's just, yeah. So this prayer is a prayer of blessing. And remember, do you remember all the way back, for those who are here, in the Pentateuch, where I defined blessing over and over and over again? Do you remember the definition? You don't have to say it, but just some smiles is nice. Blessing is receiving the benefits of God's favor. That's what it is. And then when you're being a blessing to others, you are passing on those benefits of God's favor. And so that's what a benediction is. It's asking for God's favor. Okay? And this prayer of blessing is for those who want to continue following Jesus, even though alternative options seem appealing. Even though the alternative options seem appealing. This prayer is for you. If you ever think to yourself, I don't know about Christianity. This is too constricting. There's too many rules, or it's too hard, and you're tempted to go follow some other thing that seems easier. Pray this prayer over yourself. Ask for someone else to pray this for you. Somehow it has the meaning and the power to do that. It is a prayer for those who feel burdened. Anyone feel burdened, tired, weary, empty? It's a prayer worth memorizing and reciting to yourself and others, because those times will come when you feel too tired. It is a prayer that God will give you everything good for doing what he asks of you. God asks us to do stuff for him. We are his hands and feet. It's a prayer asking God to give us what we need to do his work. God made an eternal promise that cannot be broken. And his prayer is about that promise. The promise came through the sacrifice of Jesus. And Jesus is our great shepherd, our great caretaker, the one who looks after us, make sure we have everything we need. And Jesus was raised from the dead and is now alive, and he is a human, renewed human person in heaven, interceding for us. And now, through Jesus, God provides us with everything we need to please him. He makes us into the images of him that are pleasing to him, that we're meant to be. This doesn't happen instantaneously. It happens over time, and it will fully when we are renewed. The message of Hebrews is that Jesus Christ brings everything into order. God and humans. God and creation. Humans and creation. He brings all of that into order. Whatever has gone wrong is being made right because Christ is the King. This is our hope, and it is what shapes our lives individually and together as God's people. Let's pray. Father in heaven, you know how heavy these words can feel sometimes. But they are not meant to weigh us down, but to lift us up. And so I pray especially for those here today who feel weighed down by these words, that they would hear them as life, as nourishment, that they would be empowered to live for you, to live as a blessing for others. I pray for the weary and the tired, the ones who are feeling lonely, who feel like giving up. I pray that you would strengthen them. That we together as your people, as your local family here in Hoadley, that we would represent you well by the way we live, in holiness and purity. May we represent you well. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.